Stress is probably the highest cause of all disease and sleep disruption. In today's episode, we answer 3 key questions. How are stress and sleep so closely intertwined? Why is it critical to get trauma out of our body so we can move out of survival mode? How are trauma and stress connected to not being good enough and impactful to healing and sleep? Physiotherapist Danielle Sax, after overcoming a stress-related illness, became passionate about the mind-body connection. She aims to empower individuals to embrace their true selves without sacrifice. In her book, she discusses overcoming the fear of inadequacy. As an international speaker and life strategist, she focuses on living authentic success and hosts a radio show From Stress to Authentic Success. Daniella, a grandmother of 4, lives purposefully in Belgium, cherishing nature and connecting with like-minded individuals. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, I'm Deepa, light functional medicine practitioner, author and yogini, and you're listening to the Sleep Whisperer podcast, the only sleep podcast with conversations and meditations. I'm on a mission to share profoundly insightful sleep conversations with global visionaries that merge together functional medicine and ancient wisdom. Breathe in bliss through weekly guided meditations and let yourself enter the land of dreams. Together, let's unravel the pieces, get to the roots, and understand the right tools to transform your sleep completely. Through this podcast, I want you to dream the best version of yourself. It's time to regain hope and begin your sleep journey.
Danielle, welcome to the Sleep Whisperer podcast, and this time we're going the other way around, and last time you had me on your podcast.
Yes.
I think
Thank you for having me. I just want to say I'm really honored that you asked me back.
It's a pleasure to have you, and we had a great connection last time as well. So I think that, in the space of sleep podcasts, health podcasts, there's so much of information and the science, but I feel truly somewhere in my heart that people resonate a whole lot more to the personal story and our vulnerabilities.
Yes,
and I just feel that sometimes you get overwhelmed by the information out there in health podcasts especially, and sometimes I feel it's counterproductive to what they're trying to achieve because it just leaves the listener feeling so overwhelmed. So I would love
There's
to
nothing more important than the story. Your story, my story, that's
Absolutely.
what people love to hear.
So I think today I would like to set aside the typical podcast format of the science and the subject and talk to you about you as a person. I know that stress has played a big part in your life and therefore impacting sleep as well. But talk to us a little bit about your own story and your vulnerabilities, whatever you're willing to share.
Well, maybe it's important to share that already from a very young age, I grew up in a beautiful, household. But when I was 5 years old, my little brother, I had a sister, an older sister. I was 5, and there came a little brother. And at 6 months old, I went to school in the morning. I came back at lunchtime, and he had died from cot death. And we are now talking about, let's say, 56 years ago, 57 years ago, Deepa. So you can imagine that at that stage, trauma wasn't seen as it is now. The little T trauma or the big T trauma, it was a totally different thing. So I, as a highly sensitive child, took it upon me because I saw my parents and my sister in such sadness and grief and stress, and that I took it upon me as my responsibility to not just take care of them, but to be the good girl, to be the good daughter, the good sister. And that subconscious truth, like really imprinting that I did upon myself, made that the years ahead, I was always, also as a sensitive person, trying to be good and trying to be enough for others and meeting the expectations of my outside world, of society. And that went on and on. And I have to say, I had a few losses, because loss is a big thing in my life, like my piano teacher, my favorite horse, all these things. But and I studied my first education as a physiotherapist because I had so much back pain and physical things, and I was helped by the physio. So I studied physiotherapy in my first life, and there I encountered what stress and grief and all these things and trauma could do to the body. And so, but it wasn't until I myself at 38 years old got very sick due to a serious stress-related illness. I had a long period of trying to be good enough and really going in overdrive. And my first signs actually were loss of sleep. It's often those first signs, the loss of sleep, the anxiety attacks, the pain, the strain in the body. So it wasn't until I really had that illness that I realized the mind-body connection. And when we talk about sleep, it's a big thing. I mean, the mind-body connection is such a beautiful concept. And in my story, it has, been a big thing because it took me 5 years to recover. My whole immune system collapsed in one day. So I was a very sporty woman. I had 3 children. I had a social life. I worked, like the octopus kind of woman, the one who does it all, the superwoman. I thought I was superwoman, and I tried to be superwoman in all my roles in life, as a mother, as a daughter, as I said, as a physio, all these things. And then suddenly my body, because I didn't listen to the signals. And so my body said, stop. From one day to another, it was a red light. My whole immune system collapsed. I had a big virus in my lungs. It was like a big black spot in my right lung on the x-rays. And that whole immune system collapsed, meaning I lost my sleep. I lost my energy. I was lying flat on my back, and it was a very, very scary thing. And at night, I had these huge panic attacks during my sleep, from my subconscious mind. In my sleep, those attacks came in. Like, I used to wake up like, like thinking I was going to die. That's what you think when you have a panic attack. And so if you talk to someone about sleep, I'm certainly one of the people who can testify then if you can't sleep, it's one of the biggest punishments there is, because your sleep is such a big thing in life. It's a basic condition to be healthy, to feel well, to function. And so to me, that was a big, for your listeners, because this podcast is about sleep. In my story, the sleep was one of my biggest dramatic symptoms that I lost. I lost my sleep. And so that's the story until I got ill.
Danielle, that recently I did an episode with a doctor in the UK called Dr. Deepa Ravindran, and he spoke about trauma-informed care. And basically, when we spoke about what is trauma-informed care, he spoke about how, we've started to realize that in mainstream medicine, these big T's and small T's play a big role in development of illness. So it's wonderful to see that doctors in the front line are bringing attention to concepts such as trauma, because so many of us have had such incidents of trauma. You spoke about your brother's sudden, I can't even begin to comprehend how you can process the sudden death of a young child for no rhyme or reason. And you did
Deepa,
tell,
can I
yes.
say, because I want your listeners to understand, and I'm not a, I'm a very positive person, but you need to understand that at that time, we are talking about 1966. At that time, as you were mentioning now doctors and everybody, and there's much out there, even on internet, even you can look up, how to deal, or you can look for help. You can go to a psychologist, you can go this to get that trauma out of your body, out of your mind. But you have to realize that for my mom and my dad, it was such a shock to the system, for the whole family, that everybody was in a survival modus. And you and I, we know that when we're in a survival modus, everybody does it in a different way. One will contract, one will start, there's different ways. There's freezing, there's fighting, there's flight. There's so many different ways to cope with that. But one needs to understand, and that's why I'm always very careful with what I say to people, because 50, 60 years ago, there wasn't even the family doctor didn't even talk to me as a child on what is this for you, how do you feel. Nobody ever asked me how I felt, because I was the brave girl, and I was showing everybody that I would care for my family. I took on such responsibility, and that was a big thing. You see, we all respond in a different way. My sister, who was 2.5 years older, responded in a totally different way. And so I just want to say that what happened then, and I think a lot of people are 50, 60 years old today, 70 years old today. I don't even want to talk about people who lived the war. Can you imagine, like the First World War, the Second World War? These are big T's, like you say. But it's also about the small T's. In my practice, when I do hypnosis, I see the little T's, like a teacher who says to a 6-year-old that she's not capable of speaking well in front of the class. That little girl has a problem with speaking in public, or even in just a meeting in the corporate world, or even at the table, at the dinner table, to speak her truth. You see, so it can be, it gives me goosebumps. It can be small T's like that in that time needed. Now, if that happens, the little girl of 6 years old can be guided, can be helped, can be taken care of, because there's special care at school, there's all sorts of things going on. But 60 years ago, 50 years ago, Deepa, we talking, so there's this generation like me that never had guidance, never had help with trauma. And we have to see how much it has evolved, how beautiful, even the sleep. When we talk about sleep, that I was put in a psycho ward with burglar guards on my window, so that I could not escape. That's how they saw me at first in the beginning, when I had these anxiety and panic attacks and I couldn't sleep. When you couldn't sleep 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you were put into a ward. Now, I mean, can you see what I'm saying? So the whole approach has changed so much, that I am so grateful for today. That's why we are doing what we're doing. I mean, there was no podcast, hey? There was no story to listen to. People couldn't hear each other's story. I thought I was on my own in the beginning when I was ill, and that's now 25, 26 years ago. I thought I was an alien. While now, when you see how many people have sleeping disorders, problems, they are not put into a psycho things ward, hey? We treat them properly. I mean, does that make sense? That for me is a big, big change that I so embrace and I'm so grateful for.
I think that's such a valid point you brought up, Danielle, about how few decades has made such a big difference in how the world is viewing something. And
Yes.
it's ironic that with all this acceptance, and we're accepting that people have trauma, that trauma plays a role, and still sleep challenges are only getting worse every single day. And that's kind of ironic. But I would like to talk a little bit about, you spoke about when you became ill. Would you be open to sharing a little bit about that?
Of course. What would you like to know
Would
about
like
that?
to
The
just
start, the
know
how?
about, yeah, what happened? Do you feel that it's linked to perhaps decades of not giving attention to what was going on and just going about? And what happened to you? What do you feel were the contributors to it?
In my book, Shifting Out of Chronic Stress, because I'm now, seen as an expert, mostly also on self-care and authentic success. And when I look back in my book, and I do believe that is so important for anyone listening now to hear, is that to me, the basic chronic stress in our society is the fear of not being good enough. It's the fear, it has all to do with our self-worth, with our self-image, with our self-love, with our self-esteem. That's where it starts. And that's why I told you the story about when I was 5.5, because that to me, before that, I was absolutely fine. But it was that and a highly sensitive person quickly has that fear, because we are looking at the outside world. Is everybody happy? We are putting ourselves last. We look first at, and I did that my whole first life until I was 37, 38 when I got sick. Then I realized how sensitive I was, how much I had taken upon me all these roles in life. To, as I said, to be the good girl, to be the good mom, to be the good, all these things. And it put such pressure on me. I lost my essence of who I was and what I felt and what I needed. So I was always focused on the outside world, not on my own inner world. And so I did not take responsibility for myself. And that is a big misconception, is people think that being responsible and taking responsibility has to do with the outer world. And the fear of not being good enough has to do with, am I good? In your roles, the responsibility in your roles in society, in your job, as a mom, as a partner. But how many women and men, I have as many men as women in my practice. So it's not, it's all about not losing our essence. It's about putting the oxygen mask first on yourself, and like in the plane. And so when you ask me about why I got sick, it's that. It's about, for me, the 30 years of chronic stress, looking at the outside world. Am I good at? Have I done well? Am I good for this? What are they saying? What are they thinking of me? And so always looking at the outside world. And so that fear for not being good enough is so imprinted that it almost rules your life. You are lived. You don't live. You are lived. You are sitting in the backseat of your car being your life, even in the trunk. And so to me, what I've done in healing, my whole way to shift out of stress and have that journey back into balance, and think it's all about the inner world for me. And so I've done that, that journey, and it's one of the most beautiful journeys one can do. You are your best investment always. And when we talk about vulnerable, I want to tell you that I was so ill, Deepa. I can cry still today, but I am so grateful that I was so ill, because it's very important that people hear this message. Don't wait until your body stops you in 1 second. I was flat I was at the fitness. I was doing fitness, and suddenly I got very wobbly, and a few hours later I was in hospital and I couldn't do anything anymore. So just to tell you that, why are we waiting for the crisis, for the body to stop us? Why are we not listening to the signals, and that's why I'm, it's my mission now to to prevent that kind of thing to happen to people. I still see in my practice that people wait until they have a burnout, until there's a crisis, until they have a stomach problem, something big most of the time happening, a crisis or, a divorce or something like that happening. And then they are vulnerable enough to ask for help. Asking for help still today, and I was saying that 50 years ago, there was no help. But still today, asking for help sometimes seems like a weakness. And I'm vulnerable enough to say to anyone listening, please ask for guidance, for help. There's help out there. There's so much. And it's not about information. It's about integration and implementation. We all know about self-care, and we think it has to do with eating well, sleeping. And sleeping is the biggest part, almost for me, because that's how I lived it. The day I could start to sleep again, and in the beginning it was with a lot of medication, I'll be vulnerable. It was there was nothing else that could keep me down and make me sleep than heavy medication. But I'm grateful that it exists, because without that, I wouldn't have been here. I couldn't even talk today. So sometimes medicine really is needed, and I needed that medicine at that moment. So the fear, the anxiety, there was also so there was mental things going on, emotional things going on. My body physically couldn't cope anymore, and there was financial struggle as well. We were in South Africa, and there was a lot of corruption there, and with our young family, we were really taken, for quite a lot of financial, quite a lot of money. And so it's all these things that made my body say, stress enough. It was a chronic stress that build up, and then suddenly the body says stop. But isn't it strange that today I am grateful for it? Isn't that amazing? Grateful because I am so grateful to my body that it gave me the sign to stop. Otherwise, I would have maybe had a heart attack or something else would have happened. This time, it was a red light. I was flat on my back. I couldn't wash myself for many times, many days. It was really a stressful time, but it was the biggest present because it got me growing, evolving, healing, taking on that journey to heal myself, to get back to my essence, to be exactly who I am and why I am here in this world. So we need to sometimes also see the illness or the stress or as an opportunity and that takes a lot of vulnerability and courage to see it that way and not condemn or judge it. I've accepted it. I know I've made a lot of mistakes. I asked a lot of myself, but thank you, universe, for this journey, because I wouldn't be here today if it was without that.
That was beautiful, Danielle, and I think we don't have too much time, but however, you shared two very important things which I'd like to quickly unpack. One was this feeling about we never feel good enough. And I just want to say that living in a world of social media, it seems almost impossible to not feel that way, because every time you're out there, it's somebody's right. And it's almost like it's messing with the most stable of minds. I can tell you for sure that, you can convince yourself of anything, but when you go out there and then when you're told try to engage with people, and then you see this engagement which is sending this subliminal message that you're not good enough.
Yes.
Do you have any way, an approach which you said I've gone on from that feeling to feeling coming back to my essence? So could you share one way that we can do that? Because I think that's a very important piece, one that, when we don't feel good enough, it's responsible for physiology giving up on us,
Yes.
mind giving up on us, and everything comes from that. If you were to ask me, is there a one biggest factor for imbalance, I would say not feeling good enough. So
I
is
agree.
there something that we can actually do? What do you feel helped you move from not feeling good enough to coming back to feeling you were enough?
Well, it's a process, eh? It's a journey. Deepa, let's be clear. There's not one tip. If there would be one tip that I could give, then I would be somewhere in Thailand with a cocktail on the beach. There would be no work for me, and I would be. But what I want to say is, I have a 7-step journey that I do with my clients, and it builds up. So it's a journey. It's a process. But one of the biggest, and maybe I can share the first step, and I've talked already a little bit about it. The first step in anything that you want to change is taking responsibility. That means becoming aware of what is going. If you're not awareness, consciousness is the first thing. If you're not aware, you can't change it. But that taking responsibility, as I explained in the beginning, is a big one, because we take so much responsibility for roles in our life, but we don't take responsibility for our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own actions, needs, that kind of thing. So sitting in the driver's seat of your car is, for highly sensitive people, for many people in this society, a big challenge, because we are used to sit in the trunk. Like you say, social media are driving our life sometimes. The supermarket, the advertising, they are sitting in the driver's seat of our car. People, it gives me goosebumps again. So people don't realize that often in many situations, in many systems in our society, we are not in the driver's seat. People are in the driver's seat, advertising, systems, social media. So it's time. That's when you can get back to your essence, is first take responsibility. Be aware of what is going on, looking at different areas in your life and being aware of what is going on in your inner world. How am I thinking? So it's a complex, but I think if people can just that take away from today, and that counts for your sleep as well. Be honest, because the second step is being honest also. Once you are aware, being honest and looking at it and seeing, okay, that's how it is now. It doesn't have to stay like that in the truth. I don't have to stay in the truth of, I need to be the good girl. I changed that imprint. I don't need to be the good girl anymore. I'm not 5, 6 years old anymore. I don't need to be. I can be just me, and that's enough. So it's a journey. Can you see it's a journey? But I think taking responsibility for yourself, Deepa, is a big one. And I'm doing a masterclass soon on that as well, because it's people are too much focused and at the outside world, like you say, in social media, on TV, in any media, and we look too much at the outside world, and that determines our inside world. It must be the opposite. It's our inside world who determines our outside. That's what works the best. All is energy. Sleep is energy. It's all energy.
And I
Does that
think
answer a little bit your question?
yes, a little bit, Danielle. And I think to finish, I want to go into the other point you spoke about, which is why do we wait until our body collapse before we learn a lesson? And, I've also made it my mission to try and tell people to listen to your body when it whispers or it will be
Yes.
forced to scream at you. In Ayurveda, there's a beautiful saying that there are 6 stages of disease, and what shows up in a hospital or a lab is only in stage 5 or 6. So you've already progressed in disease. So it talks a lot about how in stage 1 and 2 you have so many signs that your body
Yes.
is tipping off even keel, and how if you make a turnaround at that point in time you can stop the progression. So I would love for us to wrap up your episode talking a little bit about Of course, we all want people to listen when it whispers, but any thoughts about why we keep doing this to ourselves? Why do we listen when the loved one passes away? Why do we only listen when somebody gets a fatal diagnosis? Or, it's just alarming as a world.
I can answer that question with, I've been through a lot of research, as you do, with Dr. Joe Dispenza and all these people. And when you know Deepa, and I find it so interesting, the neuroscience, how, why are we doing this? Why is our brain doing this? And when you know that 90% of our thoughts of today are the same as yesterday, and 90% of our thoughts of tomorrow are the same as today, that means we predict, the future. So if we don't change our thinking, that's why I'm saying taking responsibility for what am I thinking, the awareness, being aware. If your body shows you, whether it's, I'm just saying, neck pain and shoulder pain, ask yourself the right questions. Not what pill can I take so I don't have the pain, but ask yourself the question, what is going on? What burden am I, what weight is on my shoulders? In any symptom, even the stomach, the toe, any place in your body, you can always ask the question, what are you trying to say? What is going on? Stomach pain. What is it that I can't digest? What is going, that kind, if you have throat, I had a client with a big throat infection. We had a whole session on what is it that your throat chakra is contracting? What is it that you can't speak about? So to me, it's all about, instead of living on autopilot, like we are programmed to do, even neuroscience, the brain is proving it to us, is becoming more aware, more, okay, that symptom, I've been now 2 days with this pain there, or with this shoulder, or with this migraine. Every 2 months I have a migraine. Go a bit deeper and ask the questions, because that's where a lot of things can become more clear. And if you have clarity, if you can find, we call it also the root cause, in hypnosis, we go to the root cause of the problem. And sometimes it's really interesting to find the root cause of the physical symptoms or the emotional symptoms, or, so it's very, very useful to go deeper. Instead of just living on autopilot, doing every day, waking up, And that's why maybe I can end with this, because I think it's Anita Morjani who says, practice your self-love as if it's a life-saving thing or something, because it is. Every day, do practice that self-care and that self-love, because it is life-saving. It is your life jacket. It is so important. And so your life depends on how aware that you are and how conscious that you are practicing your self-care, your self-love, and all these things. So I think that's maybe a nice one to finish off with, is that just do it as if it's your last day, as if your life depends on it, because it does.
Beautiful, Danielle. And I'm thinking about so many things on this context, and I would like you to offer one practical tool, since we did talk a lot about social media as a root of us not feeling good enough. What would be your advice for intentional social media? Because it's not going to go away, it's a part of our future. What would you say is a practical way that we can implement something in our life where we're not impacted negatively? So, is it that we have intentional time where we go into it? Is it that we, even if you choose to not follow accounts which are more aggressive and focused on just trying to show their point of view. The fact is that even in subtle comments, even in the energy of the space can
Yes.
sometimes feel as if it's overwhelming and depleting. So, would you leave us with one final takeaway, a practical way that we can be on social media without losing the essence of ourselves?
Well, I do believe that social media can be something that can help you. So what I would suggest is I interviewed not too long ago, a few months ago, an English lady who founded a system for children, for youngster, how to go on with social media, and she had invented tokens, and so every child gets like three, let's say seven tokens a week, and you can choose when you use those tokens. But when that time of that token is done, it's done. So it's about, and I just want to give that as a tip. It's about locking your time, whether it's with email, it's the same. Whether it's with your computer work, it's the same. Block out times, and I think with social media, as limited as possible. And for me, the one thing that is important is that when you look on social media, I want you to look for inspiration, not comparison. When you feel that you are comparing yourself, that you think, oh, she's doing that and I'm not that far, or oh, she's slim so and I'm not, oh, she's cooking a lot of beautiful meals and I can't do that. When you go into comparison, it's time to stop. When it's inspiration and it makes you feel more worthy and more, wow, yes, your potential, your self-worth, your motivation, that's a totally different thing. So to me, it's about stopping the comparison. Is that a practical enough tip for you? But I find the tokens, the limited periods that you use your phone, because I think every phone now says this week you were on your phone two hours a day. I have clients who are on their phone 6.5 hours a day. I mean, then you know that you need to, but it's a drug, it's an addiction as well. It has become such a poison in our society. So to me, the practical tip is, if you feel yourself comparing, time to stop. That's not one to follow. That's not one to look at. No, just do it as an inspiration and a
I think that's
motivation.
perfect, Danielle, to end. I think that's really beautiful that we all, I think, feel that comparison. And I think that's a great cue to just say, okay, it's time to take a break. I love
Yes,
also the system of tokens. However, I'm just wondering the challenges of implementing it, because children,
it is.
especially today, are so hooked to it that
Yes,
one of the mental health hospitals in India has started an entire wing on de addiction from phone usage for adults
I'm
and
not
children.
surprised.
And it shows what a real problem that is in our modern age.
Yes.
And I think the token system sounds wonderful.
Can
However,
I add something here,
yes,
Deepa?
absolutely.
Just to finish, because I want any parent. I mean, most listeners of your podcasts are probably parenting in any way. It doesn't have to be your child, in school, whatever it is. I just want to tell you that I have so many parents here or people here who ask their children not to go on their cell phone while they do it themselves at any moment in time. And so the children, please understand, children are copying you. Their subconscious mind, they copy what they don't do, what you say, they do what you do. So as it's the same with smoking, it's the same with TV watching, with screens. Whatever you do, know that your child will always copy you. So it doesn't start with the child, it starts with the parent. That
Perfect.
for me is a big
Perfect.
one.
I think so. I'm in full agreement with you, Danielle. I see it all the time. And I really think that we have a long way to go before we can tell our children what they must be. And I don't know if it's probably a more challenging world for our kids, because I can see from when I was in school to when my son is in high school, he hardly has any handwriting. Everything is on the screen, every assignment's on the screen. And I think we're setting up education itself in a way where we are
I
creating
agree.
this dependency and the addiction of the screens. And I think that's a real problem in the world today. But I mean,
It's a
we
problem
can,
for sleep.
yes, absolutely. And I think,
Imagine being on
yeah,
that screen, and then you close your eyes and you want your brain to shut down. Sorry, the curtain won't close, eh?
yes. Beautiful, Danielle. I think this was a very important conversation. For me, the biggest takeaways from today was one, that the problem is that we don't feel good enough. Two is that it's a real problem that we wait for our body to scream. Three, that stop social media the moment you're comparing and instead look for inspiration. That was a beautiful
Yes.
takeaway to end the whole episode on. And of course, using a token system. I'd love to know actually if you can share, I can put it in the show notes about who said that. So, is there a way that we
I'll
can
have to look it up. I
structure
can't remember
that?
the name.
No worries. But it seems like a good, of course, I'd still be concerned about practical implementation of it, but we can all keep trying. We can all try to pay it forward to someone else and hope that we change the world together.
I so agree. And thank you for this beautiful, authentic conversation, because I think, you see, this podcast is inspiration. There's nothing in here to compare. Please don't compare yourself to me or to Deepa please take everything we say as an inspiration, as something. If you are not having a lot of self-worth today, that's okay. Accept where you are now. That's what I was saying. Go for help. Go for guidance. There's so much out there. You can connect with me, with Deepa, with there's so many beautiful souls who are really ready to help you. And so there's no shame anymore. I feel there's no shame. Asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. So anyone listening, please be inspired. Don't compare yourself. Big one.
Good one to end on, Daniel. Thank you so much for giving your time, sharing honest, vulnerable parts of your story. I'm very blessed that you had this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
When it comes to stress, Abhyanga, the ancient practice to soothe the nervous system, is a game changer. In my ancient Abhyanga masterclass, you can get frameworks to choose the right oil, massage with the right energy meridians, and create your own bath powder. Buy yours at www.ohahealth.com. Have a great day.
This podcast is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subject matter covered in the episodes. The podcast is not acting in the capacity of a doctor or a registered dietitian and is not rendering any professional healthcare or medical service. The information in the podcast is not intended as a substitute for medical advice or services or as treatment or cure for any particular health condition. The advice and tools contained herein may not be suitable for your situation. Any medical questions regarding contraindications and cautions, or any questions on whether or not to proceed with any practices provided in the show should be referred to qualified health professionals before adopting the same. The podcast specifically disclaims any responsibility for any liability, loss, risk, personal or otherwise, which may be incurred as a direct or indirect consequence of the use of information from this podcast or the application, adoption of any of the information provided.